everybody. Welcome to this event, both to those of you who are here in person, it's wonderful to see you, and to those of you who are joining us online. My name is Sarah Tiam. I'm the Chief Executive of the Scottish Council for Development and Industry, SCDI, and I'm delighted to be at this event and in conversation at this event, which has been developed by the Scottish Government in partnership with Michelin and the European Policies Research Centre at the University of Strathclyde. Making progress in transforming industrial clusters and sites in a just way is critical to achieving our climate targets. And COP26 provides us with a unique opportunity to showcase the progress Scotland is making and to learn from our international friends and partners. But key to all of this is that strong partnership working between government and industry. And so I'm delighted to be joined today by Scotland's Cabinet Secretary for Finance and the Economy, Forbes MSP, and also the CEO of Michelin, Florent Menegaux, to hear about the exciting work that has been going on at Michelin Scotland Innovation Park, which is very much an international exemplar from our point of view. So if I could come to you first, perhaps, Cabinet Secretary. So it's day 2 of COP26. What are your hopes and expectations of what it will achieve?
Well, good afternoon, and it's wonderful to see you all today, and wonderful to share a stage with you, Florent. I think in terms of our ambitions, and I'm sure you've all been thoroughly enjoying just the buzz of the international community coming together to discuss issues that are very unifying across the board, but also very challenging. And so to answer your question specifically, I think there's probably 3 things that we are interested in, or certainly that I'm looking at. The first is a pretty obvious one, and it's making sure that we can get to a position where we limit emissions to keep 1.5 degrees in range. And that, I think, is the global aspiration that we need to work towards. But there are 2 ambitions I have for your host country of Scotland. And the first is that we too can play our part when it comes to our climate ambition. Scotland has, it's a very challenging, very ambitious climate change ambitious, net zero by 2045 in law itself. And so we need to play our part in all of that, and I'm sure we'll unpack some of the challenges to that. But the third ambition is why this event is so important, because the third ambition is that we also recognise the economic opportunities that are emerging from the challenges of meeting our climate change ambitions. And I don't know if selfish is the right word, but I want to secure those opportunities here in Scotland. I want to make sure that the opportunities for investors are here in Scotland, that we work very closely with the private sector, private-public partnerships coming together to ensure that the investment that's required in R&D, the investment in new tech solutions, the investment in new jobs, all of these can play their part here in Scotland, so that too often, I think, although less and less, we are pitting climate change ambitions against economic opportunities. And actually, there are enormous economic opportunities coming out of us meeting our climate change ambitions. And I'm keen that we secure as many of those opportunities in Scotland as possible.
Florent, from a Michelin point of view, your hopes and aspirations for the COP?
Maybe just to rebound on what Cabinet Secretary has just said, I think from a business point of view, right now, I think it's time for us to move into action. Overall, I think the stakes are, everybody understands the stakes, and what we need is really a regulatory framework that is first stable, that is understandable, that is homogeneous around the world, because we operate in 174 countries around the world. It is very, very complex to address all the local policies, especially where we have a global issue to tackle. So we need really stable, homogeneous, and clear rules of the game so that we can, for the business, then we can enter into action. And the last thing is, yes, I strongly believe in public and private partnerships, where the public sector sets the what. What do we need to achieve? What are the goals? And the private sector innovates and defines the how. Sometimes it's not clear, because when the regulators regulate the how and the businesses tell the what, it becomes problematic, I think. So out of COP26, I think discussions are now taking place. It's not about, it's now mobilizing every energy to put things in motion.
And so innovation really at the heart of Michelin for very many years, and what you're looking for really is a level playing field and some level of similarity in the different regulatory frameworks that you're encountering across the world. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the kind of things that Michelin is doing here in Scotland and around the world in terms of getting to net zero, the contribution you're making there?
Yeah, so of course we are playing, as every human activity, we have an impact on our ecosystems, whether it's on natural resources, whether it's on CO2 emissions. So we have made commitments to make sure that we diminish drastically the impact of all our activities. And I want also to stress the fact that we need to look at the positive impact our activities have at the same time as the negative impact of our activities. So as far as the commitment we've made, of course, we are aiming at we are committed to net zero by 2050, with reducing our manufacturing CO2 impact by 50% by 2030, so very drastic reduction. And we are committed as well to reduce the impact of our products when in use. And that's the major impact, is when tires are used on a vehicle. And we want to reduce by 20% that impact. But we are also many different metrics we are taking. And one aspiration we have is also we need the regulatory authorities on a worldwide basis to help us on the metrics. Because there are so many ways of looking at a very complex problem that what we need is, I would say, at least common metrics. If we could have that, it would be very useful. But we have commitment on the water consumption. We have also commitment on sustainable restructuring. Corporations are living bodies. We need to adapt constantly to our environment, to the evolution of our markets, but we want to make sure that we commit to our people that if we had to do a restructuring, we will do that to make sure that everyone that is impacted by that restructuring will find a proper position. And here at Dundee, that's what we did. We decided to close the plant in November 2018, and out of the 846 people that were touched by that decision, 844 have found a job right now, a stable job, because we were committed to make sure that we would train them and make sure that they would find the appropriate job. And the second commitment we make is we live in communities, and we know our activities have an impact on the community we are operating. We are not just there to take, we are also there to give back. So therefore, we have also committed, and that's where we have a very strong partnership with the Scottish Government, making sure that we recreate at least as many jobs as the one we have suppressed in the same place. And we have, I think, something that I hope will become a benchmark in our activities worldwide. We have created a dedicated corporation, Michelin Innovation Scottish Parc, to attract new type of industries that will be creating long-lasting jobs in the same area.
Great, we'll hear a bit more about that later on. Cabinet Secretary, do you want to talk to us a little bit about the kind of things that the Scottish Government is doing to make that transition to net zero?
Yeah,
I mean, and it's encouraging to hear that. I already talked about our statutory targets for net zero, but I'm a politician, so I can get away with saying this, but rhetoric is easy, action is hard. Targets are easy, delivering them is difficult. And I think that's where the rubber really does hit the road in terms of ensuring that whilst 2045 may feel a few years away, we have a 75% target by 2030. And on an annual basis, we are required to ensure that our climate change plan is still ensuring that we're on track to meet those targets. And we update the climate change plan every few years. But also as a politician, I've got a duty to listen to the experts, to understand what the challenges are, but also to take people with us, to take constituents, to take the public. And I think that's where, and I know we'll get on a little bit talking about the example in Dundee, but I think that's one of the most fascinating questions for politicians or leaders more generally, in whatever sector, whether it's private, public, third sector. How do we take people with us? How do we ensure it is just? How do we ensure we don't leave people behind? And how are we honest and upfront about the challenges that we will inevitably face? So if you just take one particular area, we've spent about £1 billion since 2009 in energy efficiency. Spending that money reduces fuel poverty as well as helps us meet our climate change ambitions. And it's looking for examples like that where you're actively supporting citizens, taking communities with you, but at the same time meeting our ambitions. And I think in getting serious about sectors that have been more challenging perhaps to see transition in, like transport, there's a challenge for all of us to figure out how do we do both things at the same time? How do we make sure that there are fundamental and sometimes difficult and rocky changes within particular sectors, but we do so in a way that still delivers that support that the population needs. Now, I'm speaking very much from a domestic context in Scotland, but that could be applied doubly so, triply so in many other parts of the world.
And would you like to talk to us a little bit about, you've begun to touch on the questions around a just transition and how we can ensure that people are not being left behind and people are being brought with us. I mean, you've touched on, you've actually provided us a really solid example of how you're doing that in Dundee. But are there other examples of how you're achieving that around the world?
Yes. Being just is something pretty complex to achieve, and because there are many dimensions to that just simple word, just. Now, we have a responsibility with the people that are making Michelin every day. And not only within Michelin, or the people, the Michelin employees, but also all our stakeholders, the suppliers and our customers. So we envision this as a sort of ecosystem. So we have responsibility with that system. So we have to make sure that we pay fair prices for our suppliers, that we create value for our customers, and also for our people, for our employees. And creating value for them is making sure that they have a chance and they are skilled appropriately for the job they would like to do. And we employ people for their life, basically, and their professional life. Therefore, the person we employ at the beginning is going to develop and would require additional skills or may want to change things in the professional area where they work. So we have constantly to upskill and reskill our people. And it's the same, I think, with the big issue we are tackling in COP26. This is a very complex issue, and I believe that science with behaviors are the two key words that would help resolving the issue we human beings have created. So on science and behaviors, it's all about learning and all about skilling, making sure that we have a massive effort. And we're here sometimes talking about technology, but not enough about upskilling, reskilling, skilling, and having the appropriate access, the just access to skills. So I believe that talents are available everywhere. Now, the issue is how do you allow that talent to exercise itself? How do you make sure that everyone has the chance to be skilled, to be trained, to get access to this learning? And getting access, this is where I think has to be just. So we spend a lot of money to do that, but we don't do enough. Because science is developing very, very fast, we really need to make an additional effort into all the teaching and all the learning, that development that we need to do for all our people.
That very much resonates with some of the work that we've been doing, looking at skills and about carbon literacy and digital literacy, actually, right throughout our careers, and that need to keep learning and keep developing and keep evolving. We're going to talk later on about the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park in Dundee, but I wonder if there are lessons there. I mean, you've talked already about skills, but what kind of key lessons you would draw for other industrial sites and clusters?
I would use the generic word of eco. So you have to be, when you have a project like that, you make sure that first it's economically viable. Economically viable. The second thing is it has to be eco-responsible. So it means that the project you create after you have done your restructuring is sustainable. So it means that it is compatible with the environment, it's compatible, it's a long-lasting. And the last one is ecosystemic. The issues are complex, and the idea that one can do everything from A to Z, I think, is slightly arrogant. So we need to make sure that you understand with whom you need to partner and how deep the partnership needs to be. That's what we did in Dundee. We need to look at the local community, the local authorities. We need to look at the governments, and we need to look at all the activities, academic, public, private, surrounding you, and think about what ecosystem you will recreate after you have perturbated the previous ecosystem.
You've described virtually perfectly the makeup of our members at the Scottish Council of Development and Industry who recognise that actually, unless public, private and civil society get together, these complex, messy, global problems are not going to be solved. So I think that's really underlined the value of partnership working for us. Is there anything you'd like to add on that, Cabinet Secretary?
I mean, it's been such a tremendous example, I think, of what's required and what will be increasingly required if we're serious about meeting our ambitions on the environment, because we had a situation where there was a threat to a number of jobs, and I think I draw three principles from our work together that are actually applicable to the work that is required over the next few years, because inevitably, and I think we just need to be honest about this, inevitably getting serious about meeting our targets is going to be disruptive to different sectors and different workplaces. And the three things that I would draw on that were first, ambition. You've got to be ambitious. Rather than being on the back foot, saying, woe is us, what are we to do? Getting ambitious about what the potential is for sectors, for workplaces, for industries as part of our transition to net zero. And we've delivered on that initial ambition for the park, that it would be sustainable, that it would look at ways to use innovation, but focus on low carbon. The second thing is there's got to be trust and openness and transparency between the private sector and the public sector. And again, that's easier said than done, but it is absolutely essential. We see that strongly, I think, through all the COP discussions, that if we're going to make progress, there has to be trust, transparency and openness between all the different parties, all the different agents. And I think particularly within a domestic context between the private and the public sector, trying to solve these problems together and being willing to work together in unusual and new ways. And the last principle is one for the public sector, which is breaking down silos. So what was so key in the MSIP situation was taking very much a Team Scotland approach. So rather than the local council doing elements and the Scottish Government doing elements and then the transport agency doing something else, and before you know it, you've grown arms and legs and it's huge. We just needed a Team Scotland approach, points of contact to work quickly, to work in an agile way to deliver on our ambitions. And so from our perspective, it challenged us, it forced us to be bigger and braver. And I think applying those three principles to the other forms of disruption we're going to see over the next few years is probably the only way that we're going to be successful in delivering on our targets.
Because none of us disagree about the outcome that we want, and I think everybody is bringing something to the table in that conversation. So I think that shared platform for action is exactly the way that we need to go. I know that Michelin has been applying some of the learning from Dundee to its plant in Bamberg, but I wondered if there's anything more that we can learn from one another.
I think we have now a joint initiative, another one that's called NICE, which is a net zero industrial, let me look at my note, cluster exchange. But I think the idea is, again, if you think about ecosystems, yes, there are learnings that Germany or France or other parts of the world can do out of Scotland, and vice versa. So this, I believe in the constant exchanges so that you can cross-fertilize and capitalize on one another. So you go faster. So thank you again for this joint commitment, because I think by creating this network of countries that are going through the same type of issues would help a lot.
Fantastic. So we have some real joint action coming out of today and further work to learn internationally. Anything you'd like to add to that, Cabinet Secretary?
No, I mean, I think there's lots of things that we can learn from other countries. And as a proud Scot, you'll forgive me for saying that maybe there's other things that we can offer. And I think this example is something that we hopefully can share more widely and share the learnings, share the mistakes as well as the successes that all of our countries are going to be contending with over the next few years.
Great. I think we do now have an opportunity for some questions from the audience, both those of you who are here in person and those of you joining us online, I think, are able to ask questions by using the Slido app. And hopefully you all have the passcode for Slido, which I have written down, just in case you don't have it. So it's hashtag 325610. And I'm not seeing any popping up on the screen. Ah, jolly good, it's up on the screen there. Yes, if you're in the room, please feel free to put your hand up. If you could introduce yourself before posing your question, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith from CBRE. Clearly, Michelin was supportive and motivated, and that's produced a very positive result. How do you deliver positive results if you're engaging with landowners or other sponsors who are not quite as supportive and positive?
I mean, it's a great question, because it's great when you have an employer who is so willing. And as you can imagine, in my current occupation, when it comes to, let's say, sad, unfortunate decisions about mass redundancies or other situations that you alluded to, you talked about landowners, it's a lot more difficult when it comes to engaging. And I think, going back to my second principle about trust, transparency and openness, these are all sort of heady and high ideals that we aspire to. But I guess the expectation from citizens is that government will be robust. So the nature of leadership is having set targets, ensuring that we meet them. And that does require robust action. And we are obviously looking at how we build in incentives for doing the right thing, but the equal and opposite side of that is where things are not progressing as they should, and action that needs to be taken. So that was a very woolly way of saying that yes, it does happen, and that's also why I'm so keen that we celebrate what's been achieved through the MSIP, because it sets again a model for excellence that can be replicated elsewhere and has solid economic justification as well as sustainability at its heart. But Florent.
But maybe if I can add on what Kate has just been saying is trust. You were mentioning that word. Trust will be the sustainability for the future. So it means that the people have a relationship with their corporations, and corporations have a relationship with the communities. Now, the essence of business is trust. So if you want to have sustainable and long-lasting trust, you need to go through what we have to go through. So it means that we need to accept restructuring, but you have to do it in a responsible manner. And I meet more and more CEOs and more corporations that understand that. Because really, what you need to realize is that making the decision to close a plant, to close a facility, is the worst decision that you have to make as a CEO. CEOs are, I'm there to make business, to develop business, to create value, to create wealth. But restructuring sometimes is needed because the market has moved, the environment has changed, but you need to do it in a compatible manner so that you do not undo the trust between the people and the corporation, or between the corporation and its environment, the communities, etc. And in the future, if you want to have a sustainable business, you need to build trust.
I've sensed in our engagement with our members over the last 18 months, 24 months, exactly what you described. There is still that, understanding and need for wealth creation, but I think I've really seen a change in attitude. I think businesses have understood that paying attention to social and environmental outcomes are just as important, and indeed their profitability, their future sustainability of the business depends on those other outcomes. And when they're thinking about restructuring that, I don't know if that's something that you have observed, but I think coming together as public, private and civil society over the last 18 months has really made us reassess quite a lot of things.
Absolutely, and if you look at COP26, it says, I think I saw a picture that says it's people, planet and prosperity. Yeah. Those three components are, you cannot split them apart, or you cannot treat them in sequence. At Michelin, we call it all sustainable. Being all sustainable means you master the three dimensions at the same time. You do not oppose one. If you start to say, to make profit or to create value, I need to do it. I need to harm my environment. It's bad. Or or I will have to compromise on my people. It's bad as well. But if you do everything for the people, but forgetting that you have to deliver value, it's bad as well because it's not sustainable. And if you do it, if you only focus on the environment without understanding that you need to be able to create the wealth, to be able to generate the investment, to be able to have the means to do what you want to do, you miss one dimension. So the people profit, the people prosperity and planet. What is difficult is the end, and I think the businesses that will just master this end will be the one that will be there in a few decades.
So it's a real triple bottom line approach being taken now by business.
P cube instead of being 3 P's. It's P cube.
Fantastic. Cabinet Secretary, anything you'd like to add to that? I think I do have a question from online.
Happy for you to take another.
Jolly good. What more? No, I had a first one. Oh, well, I've actually got quite a few now. They're all flooding in now. So, can the Scottish Government make other companies who want to close a plant follow the Michelin example? Is this a one-off?
I really do think you need two willing partners to make it as successful as MSIP. And I think the point there about the sort of trust being the lifeblood, I think increasingly too, businesses are coming under pressure from the general public, consumers, clients on doing the right thing, particularly when it comes to the environment and sustainability. And ultimately, you know, that line on profit, which is not one of the P's, is based on happy and willing customers and consumers. So I think there is a pressure point there. We in the Scottish Government do use the powers and the resources that we have to strongly encourage. I think there's 2 points I'd make, 2 quick principles I'd make. One is that we have a job to learn as well. So rather than going in and imposing what we think businesses can do or should do, I think there's a first step in learning what is important, and that's the first point. And then secondly, it's working in partnership, not working as the public sector or the Scottish Government wants the job to be done. So partnership can only exist if we are working together to deliver a joint outcome, and that requires us to be learning as much as anything, and also being willing to adapt and shape the approach to make it as easy as possible for businesses. That doesn't take away, that doesn't mean diluting the objective, but it does mean working in a way that actually enables businesses to meet those objectives.
Scotland, of course, has a very, very high number of SMEs, of small and medium-sized enterprises, and indeed micro businesses. And you know, they're not global corporates. They don't have that ability, perhaps, to try and invest coming out of a pandemic, which has been really tough on some sectors, as we know. But you know, what's the one thing that a small Scottish company can do to make the most difference to help meet those targets?
It's I don't know whether I'm the right person to answer that question, but I think it's. But one piece of advice is, if you, it's all about human beings. Corporations are made up by human beings, and for human beings and through human beings. So if you believe something should be done, do it.
Just make a start, actually, I think.
Exactly.
Keep it simple.
You keep it simple. If you think it's right, and think about this PQ, if you think it's right, do it.
Probably not a fair one to ask you either, Cabinet
Well,
Secretary.
no,
It's
I'm
never
happy
stopped
to-
me before, though.
I'd answer that actually, because you know, targets that seem in the dim and distant future can only be met if we all play our part. And that sounds like a cliche, and it's an overused line, but it's true that we can't just wait for the big businesses to do what they need to do, or the big industries to do what they need to do, or government to do what it needs to do. We can only meet those targets. We can only become sustainable if every human being, every household, every family, and every business, small, medium, and large, from the sole trader to the global corporates, play their part. And actually, if everybody did a little, you get there much easier than if we leave the big heavy lifting to just a few industries. And I think a lot of small businesses want to do the right thing, and they think that what they have to do is some huge, massive investment of money that they don't have. That's not true. It's something as simple as digitalizing. It's something as simple as investing in energy efficiency. I could go on. But often the results, if every small business did that, are significant.
And we as consumers can make a huge difference as well in terms of who we buy from. I don't know how many of you, I'm sure lots of you, really looked to your local shops and your local suppliers during the pandemic. So, you know, let's look after our own businesses. So more generally, and this is one that's found its way to the top, perhaps the big question is how we ensure our industrial estates, without the benefit of a benevolent Michelin, are decarbonised. How do we really get cracking on those big industrial estates right across Scotland when we don't have a benevolent partner? I suppose it's back to Doug's question again.
So you've just got to assume that the government then, partnership again. I know it's a tired word, but partnership. So we've got a commitment to invest substantial sums of money in decarbonising the public sector estate. In other words, trying to lead by example. And that in itself is not going to be simple and straightforward, and it's not cheap. But it is one of our commitments as part of our plan. And I think working again in partnership, I'm conscious that public sector funding in itself will not get us to net zero. It's just straightforward fact. Public sector funding will not get us to net zero. It will only be public sector funding, sometimes leveraging in private sector funding, or private sector funding doing its own thing. And we've got to make it as easy as possible. We've got to make sure that the tax system, the regulation system, procurement, every tool at our disposal enables that investment in decarbonisation, and that includes the estate.
You've both been very generous with your time this afternoon. I've got one final question from Martin Valenti from the South of Scotland Economic Enterprise. South of Scotland Enterprise, that's your name. Will Scotland's push for a just transition to net zero mean less closing of businesses, but instead more transitioning to better businesses? It's maybe a yes or no answer.
I'm not sure it's as simple as that. I mean, just transition is a concept. We have our Just Transition Commission that we established to make sure that that informed and influenced our climate change ambitions. But just transition is about not leaving people in the scrap heap. So, and a just transition is not inevitable. So I think that's a really important point. Talking about just transition enough doesn't make it inevitable. It requires several things. One, it requires us to actively consider new opportunities for the jobs of tomorrow, which are actually the jobs of today. It requires us to work with businesses to know what sectors are under pressure. We're seeing that considerably, not in the south of Scotland right yet, but in the northeast, oil and gas workers who are looking at a just transition. So I don't think there's a simple binary answer to that question.
No, so difficult questions never are simple, are they? They require multiple interventions. Final word, Florent?
Maybe just I'm very optimistic. I think we've been transitioning for the past several millennia as human beings. We've been progressing constantly. Now, we have now to master the impact of our activities, that because the technology has leveraged a lot the impact of what we're doing. But I am sure that human beings can resolve this. We have all the science. It's just a matter of better coordinating, making sure that we don't go into radicalism, because radicalism very often is bad. But I am absolutely convinced that we can undo the most of the impact we have created. So I believe in science and I believe in human beings.
What a fantastic note on which to finish. Thank you both, Cabinet Secretary and Florent Menegaux, for your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just kind of call everyone back just before I start the next session. So we're going to move into now a bit of a conversation about some of the practical elements of some of the examples of Michelin Scotland Innovation Park and some other things we're going to do. But before I do that, can I ask everyone to put their mask on? Just in terms of the space, it would actually just be helpful if everybody could wear their mask during this. That would be great. And also when you're moving about. So thank you very much. So my name's Linda Hanna. I'm from Scottish Enterprise. I was involved back in 2018 and lived through the experience that you've just heard around the setup of the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park. And it's a real pleasure actually to be here a number of years on just to see and hear how that's actually transformed in terms of how that's developed. So that's my background. I came at that from an economic development perspective, and all the words that you heard earlier on around ambition and about trust and about a team approach is very much the environment that we created together around what we're able to achieve. So it'll be good to hear a bit more about that from Greig later. This session, and both Kate and Florent talked about actually the what and the how. This section is very much about the how, and really thinking about through some different examples around how you actually can take some of those ambitions and then translate that very much into action. And as Sarah was talking about, you know, we don't disagree in the diagnosis, we don't disagree in the outcomes. It's the way that we take this forward in terms of the types of innovation and the way that we go about working together in terms of that values-based approach, which often is what makes the difference actually in terms of how successful things are. So we're actually going to talk about that in this section. So what we're going to do is make sure that we kind of hear from different perspectives. So this section is also about diversity of view, diversity of experience, diversity of circumstances, and hopefully give us an opportunity to learn about how you then take that and transform that into the actions that we all take. We've heard again this morning at the earlier session just around that people and about planet and about prosperity, and place is part of that as well. Everything happens in a place. People live in places, they work in places, and they're able to think about the future in terms of the place that they do. So the case studies that we've got are very much from both the focus of the place and also from the geography of the place. So an opportunity to think about how those have transformed. And what we've got is a number of examples right across Europe, different types of focus and different people who are going to talk about their experience in terms of what that's allowed them to do in terms of the different places. So we're going to hear 5 case studies, 2 of which are from Michelin, 1 from Dundee and from Bamberg, and 3 other ones. 1 from looking at the work in Cologne in Germany from Shell, 1 around from Finland in terms of the transformation of an industrial district to become CO2 negative, and 1 from a sectoral perspective looking at green shipping in Norway. So different places in Europe, different focus, and hopefully that gives us a chance to kind of think about how that's allowed those areas to develop. So what I'm going to do is introduce the speakers, get them to talk about their experience. Hold your questions because we're going to be running slightly late, and we're going to have a good chunk of time at the end in terms of a whole panel conversation around that. So if you could jot your questions down, we'll make sure that we come back to that. So first of all, what I'd like to do, and we've got a mix of speaker in the room and also speakers online, so hopefully the technology is going to work. So what I'd like to do first of all is to introduce Iris. She's got a background in environmental management and from resource management. She's been working since June 2020 in IN4 Climate, and this is the example that we've got, particularly around the circular economy and carbon dioxide economy. So I'd like to hand over to Iris, and then I'll make sure that I come back on the stage and then introduce the next speaker. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Hoping you're hearing me, everyone, well. I'm happy about the opportunity to give you an overview of InfoClimate NRW. InfoClimate is a joint initiative of industry, science, and the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, focusing on the energy-intensive industry. Firstly, I want to explain you our goals on my first slide. We were founded by the Ministry of Economic Affairs of North Rhine-Westphalia to secure the long-term future of North Rhine-Westphalia as a key center for industry. With this goal in mind, it is necessary to support our industry achieving climate neutrality and contributing to the Paris Agreement. NRW wants to be climate neutral in 2045. We are working with our partners of the energy-intensive industry like cement, steel or chemical industry, as well as the scientific competence network Sci4Climate NRW. On what we are working on, I want to show you on the next slide. Together with these partners, we are creating a vision of climate neutral and resource-saving primary industry. We author technology roadmaps, strategies, and support industry in starting pilot projects for a successful industry transformation. In the last 2 years, we grew up to a competence hub for a climate neutral industry and demonstrated appropriate policies for the state, federal, and EU level. Our vision is showing North Rhine-Westphalia as a blueprint for a climate neutral, competitive EU. To reach these ambitions, we are closely working together with the government, industry, and scientists in working groups, which are listed on the next slide. Currently, the topics policy framework, hydrogen, circular economy, CO2 economy, and process heat are in the focus of our work. Transforming an industrial site to climate neutrality requires a symbiosis of these topics. Consequently, companies can wait for system change to renewable energy, renewable resources, and gas infrastructure. Or companies can transform the business model, being a producer and supplier for these necessary elements to achieve the climate neutrality. As you can see, in North Rhine-Westphalia, our industry already made roadmaps how to transform their sites. ThyssenKrupp Steel started to use hydrogen instead of fossil fuels and is evaluating how CO2 can be used. Kabel Premium Pulp and Paper draws up a process engineering concept for generating process steam from deep geothermal energy. Another example is the ongoing transformation of the Shell Rhineland refinery to Shell Energy and Chemicals Parc Rhineland. At this point, I want to hand over to Shell. Thank you for your attention.
Apologies, everybody. So thank you very much, Iris. That was really helpful, I think, just in terms of setting that scene around what you've been doing, particularly in terms of green hydrogen. What we'll now do is move on to the session with Jörg from Shell, particularly looking at some of the work that they have been doing in terms of that industrial logistics. So keeping that focus on place and thinking about how that's worked forward in terms of the work they're doing in Shell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this kind introduction. Indeed, and I was very, let's say, interestingly listening to the previous conversation, also on the transformation, because let's say exactly this transformation journey is also something we here went on with our refinery, which is now an energy and chemical park. And how does it look like? You will hear during my presentation. Maybe before this, let me briefly introduce myself. So my name is Jörg Dehmel. I'm in the site leadership team, the transformation manager. So my role is really to look after how can I transform, let's say, a classical refining, petrochemical refining asset into, let's say, a future energy and chemical park. And how we have done this, that we will hear in a minute. What we have started with, and if you may go to the next slide, another one, please. We have, of course, started as a company to set our net zero emission target. So we would like to become a net zero emission company by 2050 or earlier. But what does it mean for Shell? This not only means that we need to drive for net zero emission for our own operations, so basically the emissions which are coming from our assets, but it also means that we need to change the way our products, because many of our products are being burned for its primary use, so either for heating or for mobility purposes. So we also need to support our customer in their decarbonization journey. And so this entire transformation needs to happen in line with society and customer demands. If we take a closer look on Germany, on the next slide, we can see that in Germany, before the pandemic, we had roughly 800 million tons of CO2 emissions. And 80 million tons were coming from products and our own production from Shell. So you can say we are roughly 10% of the CO2 emission problem, or we want to be, which I much more prefer, 10% of the solution of the energy transition. But if you look deeper into this, you will easily find out that the emissions which are coming from our own assets are just a very small fraction, are only 10% of the emission where we are contributing to, because most of the emissions are really happening by using our products in cars, in airplanes, or for heating purpose, or in the chemical industry. So the energy is needed also in future, and what we now developed is, together with our partners, with the industry, with the government, with the consumer, to develop a new energy system, which then allows us to transform over this period towards a net zero emission world. What is, on the next slide, we can see what the Rhineland refinery is or was. We have roughly 3,000 people working here every day, of which are 1,800 are roughly Shell employees. But let's say this is the largest refinery in Germany. Every seventh airplane before the pandemic was flying with jet from kerosene from this refinery, and every ninth truck or car was driven with diesel or gasoline from this refinery. So this volume of energy needs to be transformed into a new energy system. But also the site, roughly 25% of the crude is going into the chemical industry or chemical intermediates. So also here, energy is needed in future. We have developed out of this a vision how we would like to transform our refinery into an energy and chemical park, which you can see on the next slide. You will see in the heart our refining assets, but let's say our input, our feedstocks, will change over time. Of course, at the moment, we are predominantly using crude oil as feed to our refinery, but we are already starting now with also having renewable energy, for example, from wind, from solar, renewable power from solar and wind, but also reaching out to look for other feedstocks, for example, biogenic feedstock, biomass, bio-waste oils, gases, but also recycled material, for example, from plastic waste and municipal waste. So these are getting more and more the modern feedstock, the new feedstock, the renewable feedstock, replacing over time then the crude oil. The new products will look like, on the left upper part of the slide, you will find the new mobility products, which are, can be hydrogen, but also biofuels, or for example, bio-liquefied natural gas. And of course, we also need sustainable aviation fuels in order to allow emission-free flying of airplanes. So these are really the new mobility products, which you can do in an existing asset, with modifications, of course. But we also have quite some products which are needed also in the future. Take a look at lubricants, but also bitumen. Regardless on which road, on which car you are driving, whether it's a hydrogen car, battery electric car, it still probably will need a road, and bitumen is where the most roads are built upon. And also the entire chemical industry, so modern plastics, performance chemicals, all this needs to be produced continuously. Our transition plan is really that we first try to send the renewable products, renewable feedstocks to the mobility sector, and if we are still using crude oil, then use this primarily in areas where the crude oil is not burned for its primary use. And then, of course, we also have the entire heating sector. This is our vision, where we want to be in 2030. But this will not happen alone. This will also happen, of course, with partners. So we are also partnering up with others in order to build up the right infrastructure to allow this entire transformation in the region around our existing asset. We are also adding to this a so-called energy compass. which you can find on the next slide. So in front of our current fence, we want to build a net zero emission campus where really innovators can meet, from startups, research, industry partners, to jointly develop the new technologies which then can be implemented on our energy and chemical park. And this, of course, also will attract young talent to really joining our net zero emission vision for the future. Is this all dreams or is this real? And on the next slide, you can see the opening ceremony of our REFHYNE electrolyzer. This is the world's largest electrolyzer, which we opened in July this year, where we produce 10 megawatts of with a 10 megawatts electrolyzer making green hydrogen, which can be used in our refinery, but can also be directly used for transportation, for example, for buses, trucks, or cars. And just recently, we have made a final investment decision to also build our first bio-natural gas liquefaction unit, which then would allow, for example, net zero emission truck transport within Europe by liquefied natural gas or liquefied bio-natural gas. So you see that the entire transformation is not something which is planned, but it's really starting to become true and starting to become a vision that gets into reality. Of course, this will require much more projects and partnering up in the future, but these are, I think, exactly the right steps which enable a net zero emission future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Oh, forgot I had the mask on. Thank you very much, Jörg, and thank you very much, Iris, for giving us that example, particularly around industrial scale, very much around collaboration and partnership. And as you heard there, you know, the world's largest electrolyzers, that gives a sense of the scale of what the project's looking to do in Cologne. So what we're going to move on to now is the next case study in Finland, looking at the Hanna project, looking at the work that they're doing again around an industrial district, but to become CO2 negative, but particularly looking at new startup companies and all the work they're doing around sustainable housing and transport as well. So a different, very much a collaborative project, but very much a different kind of focus around that. So I'd like to introduce now the next speaker who's going to talk to us about that. So forgive me 2 seconds. Reijo Väliharju, who's the head of infrastructure, innovation and sustainability in the project, and the project is owned by the city of Tampere itself, so he'll be able to give a perspective again from the public sector perspective, and again maybe parallels with MSIP. He's got a good background and lots in terms of the public sector development, but also in the private sector. So with that, let me hand over to Reijo.
Moro. That's a very local way to say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from Tampere. I'm more than happy that we are getting this opportunity to share our ideas and our examples, how we are aiming that our goal to really create sustainable city district, which is going to be net CO2 negative in the future. Next slide, please. So Tampere is located in Northern Europe, and we are the second largest city region in Finland, and we are growing quite fast, and we are thinking that growth is positive thing, and that it gives that energy to really develop how we build new city district and how we can develop sustainable solutions. Next. So our area is old pulp mill factory area. Tampere has very long history to having factories in city center and near the city center. City of Tampere bought that factory area 2014, and then I have started work with this project at that time. City of Tampere make or establish city-owned company called Heiderannan Kehitys, and also transform that land ownership for our company. And now our goal is to develop that sustainable city district. Next. Our goal is to create a Western city center for Tampere. That factory and area location is quite nice because it's lakeside. It's just few kilometers away from city center, and the key solution in traffic is to expand tram line from city center to Heideranta. And I want to underline that tram line in Tampere is more or less working like a metro, so it's having same interval from morning rush to night time, and it stops on all the stops, so it works like a metro. And our goal is that first new buildings starts in our factory area 2023, and our goal is that first residents move in the 2024 or in the beginning 2025. And also our goal is that tram line start in same time that first people are moving in. Next slide. Then the one issue is when we are speaking about net zero or net negative future, then the question is what we are counting in. We have been trying to look all the aspect that this kind of city district is causing CO2 emissions, and we have been calculated how much CO2 emissions this Heideranta is going to have in the 50 years time if we continue the way how city is developed today in Finland, and how people are behaving and how industry is behaving. And as we all know that private consumption and private transportation are the biggest CO2 emission sources, but also building and energy use in city district are the big emission sources. Next slide. Then I want to give some key aspect how we have been doing our project and how we have been learning, and what I want to share with you. The key issue is get people involved. So you need to open your project you need to call people to join you, and we have been learning that it's much more easier that if you arrange something interesting, for example, children festival or circus festival, and then you can meet people and discuss them what they are thinking and what they are expecting from new city district, and how they are willing to try to achieve that big goal to be CO2 negative. Next slide. Then we are thinking that it's important to show people, to show for ourselves as developers, and also to show decision maker what that kind of really sustainable solutions means, and that's why we are running that kind of innovation platform, and we want to have examples and pilot projects. Next slide. I'm very proud that I can say that even today, Heiderannan is already CO2 negative. We are having one factory, biochar plant factory in Heiderannan already. It has been running for a few years' time, and it's producing heat energy. Actually, in Finland, we are using quite lots of biomass to produce especially heat energy. Okay, I think that I'm back in line. But so I was saying that in Finland we are using lots of biomass for producing especially heat energy, but we are burning that biomass. But in biochar plant, we are not burning, we are pyrolyzing biomass. And it's quite nice process because it produces heat energy, it produces valuable material, so biochar that you can use, for example, growing plants, and it transforms CO2 that plants has taken in when they were growing. It transforms about half of that CO2 that plants has taken in mineralic format. So it's very stable format, and that's how you can put CO2 back to ground by producing biochar. Next. We also need to look some other aspects than just CO2 emission. We are looking, for example, to recycle bio-waste, nutrient and energy back to use. And even we are already having that kind of system in Heiderannan where also sanitation bio-waste is transformed to be that kind of fertilized material. And also one company has shown how microbes can transform biomass to be to hydrogen. So we are strongly believing that microbes are having huge potential, and we need to find new ways to take all out of those microbes. Next. Even Finland, sun is shining so much that we can heat up from solar power. But the basic question is, sun is shining in summertime, and we are needing that energy in wintertime. And that's why also storing energy is one key issue that need to be looked. We already have one company which is storing heat energy from solar power from summer to winter time, and we are already using that energy by heating up one building in Heiderannan already. Next. And we are looking new materials. So we first streets and roads that we have built in Heiderannan, we have been using ash and furnace slag to build those, and also we are looking to use wooden material in when we are building buildings, and also in Finland there is lots of development to develop CO2 neutral concrete and CO2 neutral steel to use in building. Next slide. We also strongly believe that green is important. It's important for food production, but it's important also that that people can enjoy green areas. And we strongly believe that we need to give possibilities for everybody to be part of green areas. And for example, in Heiderannan is already open garden where you can be part of growing vegetables, but you can also eat those. And also small gardening boxes is already in Heiderannan, and we believe that those are also going to be the future in Heiderannan. Next. Traffic is one key solution. I already mentioned that public transportation is one key, but I want to underline that comfortable walking areas and cycling highways is also needed when we are developing really sustainable city district. Next. And of course, data and digital and real-time data is needed. But we want to underline that data need to be open and it need to have capabilities to have two-way connection so that we can control. We need to know what is happening, how much energy is used in area, how much CO2 emission is causing, but we need to have also capability to control things. And also we want to underline that also material flows need to be open and need to be known in the city district level. Next. So our first goal that we are looking at built environment and for example, my background is land use planning, and we know that we can affect how people are using transportation, and even we can affect about private consumption by making good land use planning. Next slide. Unfortunately, we are not having already CO2 negative first blocks when we start to build first blocks in Heiderannan. But we are definitely having knowledge already that we can minimize CO2 emission in building material in infrastructure. And we are very proud that we can say that in energy system, we think that we can already achieve that net zero goal by using heat pumps and solar and wind electric together with heat pumps and heating network. And we are looking how green areas can absorb CO2. We are looking how we can use biochar in green areas, and also we are looking those solutions to have CO2 capture, for example, in energy production. Next slide. Then the last thing that we want to share with you is that game is changing. Now we are playing in new kind of game. Our goal is to achieve that kind of sustainable future. That's why we all need to think our role. And for example, our company, we try to be very open with people, share those ideas. We are thinking that changes in regulation is needed, changes in taxation is needed. And we try to be open and share those ideas. But the key thing that we can change just ourselves, and that's why we have been looking our roles. Next slide. And we strongly believe that because we are city-owned company, we own that land and we sell that land for private developers. We are having capabilities to make, for example, investments. We are having that kind of key role, and we need to rethink how we are doing this city development. And always we need to think people that those solutions are that kind of that people are having afford also to live in Heiderannan in the future. So next slide. Those are the key elements that we are thinking, and I want to underline just one thing, that we need to make that kind of solutions, that sustainable solutions are the easiest one for the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reijo. Lots of parallels there that I can see, particularly for Scotland. Innovation districts are very in vogue at the moment, not least in Scotland. So lots of parallels there, particularly around district heating, solar, the work that you're doing around transport, and of course, smart cities, and really interested in the piece around CO2 and how we make that negative in terms of construction materials and concrete. So I can see lots of follow-up in terms of the conversation that we need to have. In terms of the next case study, what we're now going to move on to is a conversation particularly around the work that Narve has been doing in Norway around that, the world's most efficient and environmentally shipping. So very much a focus around a cluster partnership, so a focus on a particular sector. So looking at shipping companies, looking at the harbour, looking at the shipyards and looking at suppliers and how that is coming together. And Narve was the founding father of this programme, as he's been described, so he can give really first-hand example and experience of the thinking that has gone into that. So I'll just hand over now to Narve.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for being invited to this event. My name is Narve Mjøs, and I'm Vice President in DNV and also the Program Director of the Green Shipping Program. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me and see my slides? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me, that's fine. The Green Shipping Program is not only a public-private partnership program, it's also a tool for green competitiveness. As we see it in the program, a paradigm shift is ongoing in the maritime sector in the same way as when we went from sail to steam 140 years ago. Emissions will be regulated and get a cost both directly and indirectly. We increasingly see green demands from the market, from investors, from employees, and for the public in general, and also from our kids. In the program, we look at climate change and new requirements as a significant business opportunity globally. The vision of the program is to establish the world's most efficient and environmentally friendly shipping. The program is about profitable emission reductions with a large scaling potential based on the strong position that the Norwegian maritime industry has in markets all over the world. It is about sustainable and cost-effective logistics solutions. Cargo owners buying freight is increasingly important to make the green market to grow. It is about green jobs, increase competitive advantage, primarily with being first with new green technologies in new sectors. And we would like to be a front runner in green shipping. The program is a joint effort where all key players in the value chain are participating. That is cargo owners and buyers of transportation services. It's ship owners, it is ports, vendors of technologies and services, and also green fuels, and also public entities. When we started in 2015, in January 2015, almost 7 years ago, we were 16 private organizations and 2 ministries from the government, climate and environment, and also trade and industry. Today we have grown altogether 95 participants, whereof 10 of them are from the public sector. And why are we joining? First of all, the program is a learning program. We learn from our customers, from our vendors, and even from our competitors, and that might be difficult from time to time. We would like to achieve economical growth and also cost savings and a green competitive advantage. And we would also like to influence future regulative, financial and procurement policies and incentives. And we would like to take a lead in green shipping. This is the program in a nutshell. We execute studies, we initiate pilots, and we have an activity for scaling based on our experience. And we have 2 tracks there. It's one track for ship owners and one for cargo owners. And last but not least, we are facilitating dialogue and collaboration such that politicians, public and private leaders can take informed decisions. Most of the green technologies that we have developed in Norway is starting in our fjords and among our islands. If we shall reach the International Maritime Organization United Nations targets, it's vital that the green technologies can take the step and make the voyage from our fjords and from our islands to short sea and deep sea shipping. Some technologies and some fuels can do this, others not. Also, some of the members in the program are deep sea ship owners. They would like to learn from coastal shipping to take leadership in their core business, deep sea shipping. Initially, when we started up the program 7 years ago, usually the pilot owner was a ship owner, and the technology was typical LNG and battery power in different segments. Later on, we initiated several pilots within the area of infrastructure and green ports. The last 2 years, we have really focused on cargo owners buying the transportation services and the finance sector with great success. The cargo owners are the people that are going to pay a bit extra for the use of the green technologies, and the finance sector shall provide attractive financing for green investments. Altogether, of these 35 pilots that we have initiated, 11 of them are already realized or under construction. This is the Norwegian maritime battery story in a nutshell. In 2011, the Norwegian public road authorities issued a development contract. This led to the battery ferry Ampere in 2015. The year after, both the road administration, but also the provinces purchased to large extent green ferries. So the results are the following. Today we have 60 all-electric ferries on water in Norway, and we have altogether 199 battery-powered ships which are under construction or in operations. And we see clearly that these numbers had never been possible without the leadership from the state and green public procurement. The total number of battery ships in the world today is passing 530 altogether. And this is an enormous growth from approximately 10 years ago. And Norway has 40% of those battery ships. From April last year, Green Shipping Program started a service center for fleet renewal as a tool for scaling green solutions in the Norwegian fleet. In the service center, we work with both ship owners and cargo owners, assisting them in developing and assessing green solutions, technically, economically, and also in relation to safety. So far, we have initiated more than 70 different projects, all addressing a reduction of emissions. One of these projects started as a pilot in the Green Shipping Program, where 2 cargo owners identified that they had large complementary transport needs and that they were able to share a new vessel. One of them transporting grain from the east of Norway to the west of Norway, and the other one gravel in the opposite direction. They further developed the concept, and last year they invited ship owners in a tender for a zero-emission bulk vessel on a 15-year time charter contract. The contract was later awarded to a Norwegian shipping company called Egil Ulvan Rederi for their hydrogen-powered ship. Even if this particular contract was for one ship only, we experienced that the tender offer generated a lot of activity within the maritime industry. Initially, we had hoped to receive between 5 and 10 offers, but when the deadline had passed, we counted 31 European ship owners that were interested to bid. In the end, we received 22 complete offers where all had developed their own concept and calculated a rate for the vessel. When the ship owners were preparing for the bid, they engaged both ship designers and suppliers, and together they have spent a significant amount of time and effort. We have estimated that more than 50 ship designers and suppliers were involved. At the same time, the project offered a separate tender for the supply of hydrogen as a fuel, which again generated far more interest than anticipated, 11 offers in total. Statkraft and Skagerrak Energy jointly won the contract for supply of compressed green hydrogen. The status of this project as of today is that after the ship owner and the energy company has been selected, a detailed design process has started. We have also several other projects in pipeline. The experience so far is that focus towards cargo owners has been essential for the result we have achieved. Most ship owners are not able to make big investments in new technology with all the associated risks without having a cargo owner which is willing to share that risk. To make the market for use of green technologies to work, and the shipping industry is ready to go for it. That's the main learning. In addition, governmental funds plays an important role for bridging the cost gap. Summary of our learnings through 35 pilots and 95 participants is that coastal shipping can pave the way from into short sea shipping and deep sea shipping. and it's completely vital to collaborate and engage. Collaboration between the public and private sector, but also collaboration within the public sector and also collaboration within the private sector. The most important thing we do know in Norway is to make the green markets to work. That means green procurement in the public sector. Within the ferry sector, the weighting of the environment was approximately 30% and 70% economy. Within the private sector, that means smart regulations. And smart regulations you get with a good communication between the public and private sector. And we need an increased CO2 price as fast as possible. The Norwegian Parliament has pretty ambitious plans there. But in the meantime, we need some subsidies for green fuels in such a way that the zero emission fuel can be competitive against the fossil fuel. But this should only last for a few years, I would say up to 2030. And we are now into a piloting time. After this time, we shall do the scaling with great results. It's important to identify and resolve barriers at a very early stage. And when we choose our pilots, we should really think about the scaling possibility and what will really make the big difference with getting the emissions down. And countries, and we look at coastal shipping, green coastal shipping, in relation to future United Nations IMO requirements. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Narve, and lots in that programme, particularly in terms of looking at that green competitiveness. I really loved the fact that you talked about adaptability in different types of shipping and what that might look like in terms of different fuels. Lots in there around market making, so something about stimulating the market is we talk a lot about in Scotland, so particularly that point around the role of procurement, the role of regulation and the role of price and how that starts to kind of shift things in the public and private sector. And finally, I just loved the point about studies, pilots and scaling. So how do you learn practically about what this looks like? And in all of that, the dialogue for collaboration. So lots of lessons in there, I think, for us to think about as we move into the next session later. So we've got two final case studies, and then we're going to have a quick break before we get into a dialogue. The last two case studies both relate to Michelin. We heard a little bit earlier just around the work in Bamberg, and then we're going to top off the end of the session listening to Greig, who's with us to talk about the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park. But first of all, we're going to hear from Christian, who is leading the work in Bamberg, looking at the Clean Tech Innovation Park. He's been with Michelin for a number of years in lots of different roles, particularly as plant manager, but most recently he's been leading the work around clean tech. So I'm going to hand over to Christian, and then we'll hear from Greig around Dundee, and then we'll have a quick break before we move into questions.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Good afternoon from our Michelin site in Hallstatt, near Bamberg, in the northern part of Bavaria, Germany. My name, how introduced, is Christian Metzger, and I'm the plant manager of our Hallstatt plant, and I'm also in charge of new strategies and revitalization. Together with our team on site, I have the fantastic mission to transform our plant from an industrial site to a place where zero emission projects can be created, especially innovations who will help to decarbonize the environment. So I'm happy that I have the possibility to present to you our project of the Clean Tech Innovation Park, a project which is running more and more in reality. Maybe that you will find a lot of parallelism with the project Greig will present to us, but we benchmarked a lot with the MSIP approach. But without the help and the interest of the local politics, universities, institutes and private companies as partners, we wouldn't be able to create the Cleantech Innovation Park. We gave us 3 goals for our vision. We wanted that the Cleantech Innovation Park will create new jobs for the region, promotes the economic performance of the region, and contributes to the decarbonization in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. Next slide, please. What was the way we ran to achieve a user-orientated concept? In September 2019, we announced the closing of our Michelin plant. Sure, it was a strong moment for all our employees, but also for the region, of course. At the same time, there were a lot of announcements of staff reduction in OEMs companies around our site. Then we started already 2 weeks later with the discussions with our local politics, and we created a task force for helping the employees to find new working places, but also to think about what could happen with the land and the building. For Michelin's side, it was clear that we want to restart with a redynamization program like we have done in Dundee. Then in November 2019, we had a meeting with all the stakeholders we needed. The objective of this meeting was to give us a general orientation for our project. Then in December, we started the first benchmark meeting with our colleagues in Dundee. They started their project 10 months earlier. As a result of a long and deep discussions with universities, institutes, and private industry in our surrounding, we found at the beginning of 2020 the first focus areas and added value for our project, and we found also some synergy to move forward together. From Dundee, we heard about the My Future program for the people to prepare them for finding a new job and to help them to achieve new competencies. Thanks to this program, 77% of our former employees already found a new job, and I'm sure until the end of next year, everyone will have found a new job. Then in July 2020, we signed a strong cooperation with the city of Hallstatt, where our plant is located, and with the district of Bamberg. This cooperation was helping us to move our project much faster. And at the end of last year, we worked with many private companies of all sizes, universities and institutes in a design thinking workshop on the material in intangible concept blocks we need in our Cleantech Innovation Park. Next slide, please. With all this input from this workshop, we received in spring this year the first architectural concept and the linked organization of our future innovation park. Also in spring, we have got the first subsidies of the Bavarian Ministry of Economy in form of a human resource, a so-called technology transfer manager from Bayern Innovativ, who knows all the new technologies in the Bavaria and is in help of large back office of Bayern Innovativ. He's directly located in our plant and he works straight away with our project leader and me. With his help, we achieved in the last months that the bilateral cooperation between companies, universities, and institutes were getting more and more a real active network. Outcoming of this network, we want to create now joint projects in the following months for realization of sustainable innovations. We are convinced that in 2022 our network is solid and there will always be new forward-looking joint projects which will be realized in our Cleantech Innovation Park in Hallstatt. Next slide, please. I just explained our strong partnership with the city of Hallstatt, the district of Bamberg and Michelin. Outcoming of this cooperation, we will found between these 3 partners a new company at the end of this year with the name Cleantech Innovation Park GmbH. Next slide. I said the politics, it's very necessary, and I'm very happy now that we will get 2 live statements from public support of our project. For this, I hand over to Ms. Dr. Kallis, who is the head of the industry department of the Bavarian Ministry of Economic Affairs. Ms. Kallis.
Ladies and gentlemen, great to get this opportunity. Bavaria has an industrial share of almost a quarter of GDP, and we have over 200,000 employees in the automotive sector alone. This means we are facing several big challenges at the same time. Digitalization, transformation to e-mobility, and of course, taking account of the climate change. In this context, the Michelin project in Bamberg is very special. It's best practice. I would like to stress one feature. It's a bottom-up approach. It was initiated by Michelin together with the district and the city, and it already has a broad base of local partners in industry as well as in research and development. We think this guarantees its success, and we are very happy from the government side to accompany and also to support this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Kallis, for your statement, and thank you that you support us a lot in our project. For second live statement, I hand over to Mr. Dr. Konrad, who is a member of the Executive Board of Bayern Innovative, who supports us with the Technology Transfer Manager.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to give you a brief interview how Bayern Innovative supports the Clean Tech Innovation Park and the Michelin project. Bayern Innovative was established by the Bavarian state government, and over 25 years, the focus is on innovation, technology, and knowledge transfer. Nowadays, our main objective is the transformation of our industries to sustainable mobility, to circular economy or bio-based economy. And we think there's a need for interdisciplinary collaborations, and this is the key for our future. So our aim is to combine competences from different technology and industry sectors, which has to work together in future. So we create an ecosystem with stakeholders from different networks and clusters in Bavaria. And now the Clean Tech Innovation Park will be part of this ecosystem. And so in April this year, a colleague of Bayern Innovative starts as managing the technology transfer of the Clean Tech Innovation Park. And so we are able to build up connections of the whole Bavarian innovation network system together with the Clean Tech Innovation Park. We provide access for funding. We facilitate contacts to technology partners from industry, from science, from startups, from local authorities, through governments. And we are very glad to share also the learnings of this project and also the transformation process in Bavaria with you in the audience. Thank you very much.
A great thank you, Mr. Konrad, for your statement and your help in the past. We'll pass to the next slide, please. I said that politics is very interesting and necessary for our project. For this, I have two more written statements of our future shareholders. The first of our country governor, Mr. Kalb, who said, as country governor of the district of Bamberg and chairman of the Nuremberg metropolitan region, I am blessed that we are working together with great creative will on a concept to achieve a CO2 reduction and modernization of our economy. We are experiencing an essential transformation process in the region. The Clean Tech Innovation Park is an essential key to making this process future-proof. And on the next slide, I have a second statement of our major, Mr. Söder, who said, the Clean Tech Innovation Park is a great opportunity for our region. Here we bring together business and science, actively shape the ongoing transformation process in the automotive industry and create new jobs. We are placing a clear focus on sustainable ecology in this pioneering future project. Thank you to the two for the statements. We are going to the next slide, please. Now I will tell you how we plan to strengthen the economy in our region. There are three goals. The first goal, through targeted technology transfer, we are an innovation ecosystem in a neutral location between companies and with research institutions. Can you make a click, please? Second, by promoting technological innovations and the active design of a network or a cluster between small, middle, and large-sized companies and research departments. A third click, please. Thank you. And third, and this point is absolutely necessary if a transformation process will be successful, by offering lifelong learning to integrate employees into the development process of the new technologies and to enable them to fulfill their potential. Another click, please. And to fulfill the 3 goals, click please, it is necessary to create a local infrastructure which strengthens the regional industrial. Next slide, please. The main topics of our clean tech innovation parks will be clean energy, artificial intelligence and digitalization, sustainable and resource efficient production, and lifelong learning. On the next slide. On this slide, you have a view on the left side of our industrial plant of today and on the right side of our campus of the Clean Tech Innovation Park of tomorrow. Next click, please. On our campus, then you will find the Innovation Center. There will happen joint projects in a technological and business management area. The prototypes can build up to market readiness on modular shop floors, and education will take place directly with practical applications. You will also find the Creative Forum with creative working environments like, for example, brain cubes, networking zones where linking contacts between business and science are possible, offices where new projects will be developed and initiated, services which help that the technology transfer will happen, and areas where lifelong learning will be supported. Next slide, please. Here are only some framework points for a roadmap. Until the end of this year, we want to create our new Clean Tech Innovation Park, GmbH. Then in January next year, the overall concept will start, and we want to start with the first joint projects at the beginning of 2023. Still today, we found tenants who rent the remaining location of our plant, like former warehouses and other buildings. At the end of this year, we already recreated a quarter of the quantity of our former working places, and this still without the new places which will come with the Clean Tech Innovation Park. Next slide, please. Now I want to close my presentation with the statement of our Bavarian Minister of Economic Affairs, Mr. Aiwanger, who said, "We are blessed that Michelin, together with the city of Hallstatt and the district of Bamberg, is planning to build a clean tech innovation park and to bring in the existing land and buildings. We can assure that the Bavarian government will accompany this project and actively support it within the framework of legal and financial possibilities." And the last slide, please. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Christian. That really brought to life for me the whole kind of conversation we were having about such strong statements from partners about collaboration and the vision for the Clean Tech Innovation Park. That came across really well, and actually bring to life some of the words that Florent used earlier about eco and about how this is about cluster building and about people and skills. So it was great to see that. So last but absolutely not least, can I introduce you to Greig Coull? He's with us here in Glasgow. He's going to talk about the Michelin Scotland Innovation Park and the work that we did in Dundee, and really that kind of focus around sustainable mobility, about the values-based approach and the work that and where we've achieved and the progress to date. I'll hand over to Greig.
That's great. Thank you, Linda. And for those who have worked for me and with me for the past while, you'll notice I'm actually wearing a suit, which is a bit unusual. I'd like to talk to you about three things. I'd like to talk to you about the creation of MSIP, and how that actually came about. Secondly, I'd like to talk a little bit about progress, because we're all about getting things done and hopefully getting things done quickly. And then thirdly, a little bit on the perspectives for the next few years. I think this clicker will work. So first of all, the creation came after the closure was announced, as Florent Menegaux presented. The unfortunate decision was taken to close the plant, given that market forces were dictating that it was no longer viable. But immediately after that, Michelin, being a very ethical company with a very strong corporate social responsibility, started to look after the people. the My Future project was launched for the 850 employees who were going to lose their jobs. Over a 20-month period, employees were given 3 weeks off to pursue their job searching. They were given skills training. They were given £3,000 each to help them try and find a new solution. We also talk here about social support and a social ramp down, which meant that everyone who left on their own terms and in their own time. No one left alone. Every Friday, the factory manager and his team ensured that those people were given a proper send-off, and ideally they were able to go on the Friday and pick up a new job on the Monday. And as Florent mentioned, of the 850 people who were impacted, I think at the last count there's only one who hasn't yet found a solution, which is quite an amazing achievement given the market context at the time. Then, almost immediately, and I'll use the expression which the Cabinet Secretary used in terms of ambition, trust, and breaking down public sector silos. The Michelin Dundee Action Group was formed with the members that you see here, with an ambition to actually do something with the park, or the site as it was then, rather than flattening it, raising it to the ground, selling off the land to some other operation. The decision was made at that time with this group to try and do something different. So you see there Team Scotland in terms of the Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, Dundee City Council, Michelin obviously, and also representatives of the workforce in Unite, a Chamber of Commerce, etc. Soon after that, MSIP was created, and MSIP has 3 equal partners: Michelin, Scottish Enterprise, and Dundee City Council. Then the tyre plant closed, and as you see here, the workforce left with their heads held high. So at that point, some of you might have seen this already on YouTube, there was a pipe band, and everybody left with dignity and with pride for what they'd achieved over the past 50 years. At the start of this year, the site was handed over to MSIP, and as I've put here, a new era and a new mission began. Our mission is focused entirely on decarbonisation and sustainable mobility, and we want really to build this dynamic home, this ecosystem which Florent mentioned earlier on. And I won't leave this slide without showing you this little yellow arrow here, because actually some of the previous former Michelin employees have come to join us. They've come to join MSIP, but they've also come to join some of our tenant companies. That's very reassuring for us, and I think it demonstrates that we're on the right track. In terms of progress, this is a very busy slide. I won't go into it in too much detail. If you have any questions in the question and answer part of this programme, then we'd be very pleased to go into some depth. Here, I think you see the demonstration of the 5 pillars of the MSIP adventure. The first is infrastructure, in terms of the demolition works which were carried out to open up that green area in the middle. We also have hydrogen train conversion underway. We're planning to have a hydrogen refueling station to serve not only Dundee, but the Tayside region, and some of the tenants who will have manufacturing and innovating on the park. HGV access point has been prepared as well. Part of the interesting challenge that we have is to have part of the park as an industrial manufacturing area, and part of the park very much as a campus innovative development area, and the two in juxtaposition. And that, given that we're starting not from a blank canvas, but from a 32-hectare industrial site, is quite a challenge. We also are constructing some small purpose-built units. Companies who join us maybe join in a very embryonic state, a very early stage. They want to scale up and they want to grow, and we want to help them to do that, but we need to have the right buildings and the right workshops and the right wherewithal to do it. Next, sustainable energy. We have steam and electricity, which will come from the nearby waste-to-power plant. We have a legacy of 2 wind turbines, 2.1 megawatt wind turbines on the site, and also some of the newer buildings there were purposed for solar panels, and we'll benefit from that shortly and be able to manufacture pure green hydrogen, that is to say on a closed loop. But with the waste-to-power plant, our tenants can also benefit from behind-the-wire electricity. Third thing, and Christian talked at length about this, as did Florent and the Cabinet Secretary, it's all about skills. We're creating a skills academy with the help of Dundee and Angus College and some other partners, and that really is aimed at upskilling, reskilling, training the workforce of the future in the new technologies which will be required to make the economy grow. We have innovation activities as well. We're going to be building an innovation hub, which I often describe as the largest coffee machine in Dundee, but that's where people can meet, ideate, come together and perhaps generate things in a more natural and unforced way. We're also running accelerator programs. We have 2 virtual accelerator programs thus far with 19 companies, 3 of which are represented next week at the Greenbackers Super Pitch here at COP26. That's 26 for COP26. One of which has become a tenant, with another 2 that we're almost about to sign up as well. And we've also launched an innovation challenge. That is to try and get and generate ideas. And this challenge is all about small-scale power supplies for things like ice cream vans or chip vans or at events, or perhaps a remote traffic lights where there's a bit of work being done up in the Highlands. And last but not least, we offer a lot of support in terms of access to venture capitalists, access to funds, knowledge about the legal environment in which small companies find themselves, the financial constraints that may be upon them. A lot of smaller companies have excellent ideas, have excellent technology. Here we put them through some agitator sessions and some training to say, well, okay, fine, you've got a great idea, but how are you going to manufacture it, distribute it, sell it, get your money back, make sure you don't run out of money, etc. So we're very pleased with the success of those 2 accelerators, and more to come, but hopefully this time physically, so that we can benefit a bit more from the interaction between these companies. We now have 9 tenants on site, which we're delighted with, and a further 6 are ready to sign up. We've got about 74 jobs, of which 60 are new. So we count new jobs because what we're trying to do is regenerate and contribute in a meaningful way to the local and regional economy. So we're not trying to rob Peter to pay Paul, we're trying to grow. And thirdly, in terms of our perspectives for the future, 3 things I'd talk about is manufacturing and jobs, skills and training, and innovation. In terms of manufacturing and jobs, we need to complete the refurbishment of the 70,000 square metres of industrial workshops that we have. These workshops, some of them were built 50 years ago, so you can imagine we have some challenges around that. But again, with the support, the active support of our partners and the breaking down of the silos and the help of the City Council, for example, and planning groups, etc., we can make that happen. We want to recreate 850 direct jobs, so those jobs will be on the park, but also transform the healthy pipeline that we have. We've got a pipeline we've had lots of interest, but we've got a pipeline, I would say, how could I put it, a validated or an examined pipeline of about 30 companies. That's not to say that those that don't match with our ambitions or find themselves unable to come to us are dropped. We put them in touch with the local authority as well as other regions around Scotland to try and find a solution. But we've got about 30. We won't be able to have 30 on the park. So that begs the question, where do we go? Because these companies are ready to grow and scale and contribute directly to the 2045 targets that we have here in Scotland. but 2030, which is just round the corner, to be 75% reduction versus 1990. And we want also to remain faithful to the vision and mission of MSIP and to be aligned with that theme of decarbonisation and also sustainable mobility. That gives us a lot to run at. I've grouped them there by energy type, so energy generation, we're going to be generating ourselves on site, energy usage, storage, and also, crucially, energy efficiency. We have the strong support of our 3 partners to be able to maintain that mission. As you can imagine, when a big place like the Michelin site closes, there's a lot of interest in the buildings and the square meters and the heating that's there. But no, we've been able to keep that direct line, and we're very grateful for the support of these 3 partners. Skills and training. So we want to have about 250 learners come through our doors every year. And for that reason, again, we have to make it a campus-like, friendly and welcoming type environment. We've built a curriculum around the needs that we foresee at the moment, which are based on the standard kind of apprenticeships you can imagine, and then some more detailed use of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, for example, how do you service a wind turbine, how do you put together a hydrogen fuel cell, how do you make a battery module, how do you service an electric vehicle. We also will have bespoke packages for the companies that come on site so that we can respond to their direct needs and perhaps help them to put their feet in the door and get started 6 to 9 months more quickly than potentially they could otherwise. And another very important part of what we're doing is STEM engagement. So we will have an area set aside within the 3,000 square metres that we're transforming into the Skills Academy for the young learners in order to inspire them, to introduce them to new technologies, and hopefully, potentially, give them the confidence to move forward in... oh, sorry, excuse me, I didn't press my button there, did I? But you picked it all up, it's okay. And we have an advisory board drawn from academia, so we've got arrangements with the 3 local universities, Dundee, Abertay and St Andrews. We also have the college and all the resources of the college to draw upon. Skills Development Scotland, the Energy Skills Partnership, the City Council, Scottish Funding Council, and also members drawn from industry to say, right, what is it that you need? What exact gap do you see today in the provision of skills training? And thirdly, innovation. And it says it in the title of our organisation. We want to help companies develop and scale up. In technological terms, we're all about TRL 5, 6, up to 10. And we work with other partners to help more embryonic companies go through the initial stages up to TRL 5. We're running accelerator programs, as I mentioned, challenges, the Innovation Hub, which is going to be the biggest coffee machine you ever did see. We have a network of stakeholders who were able to draw upon to transform these opportunities into concrete initiatives. Again, we're all about getting stuff done. We have flexible innovation labs, so companies or small entrepreneurial organizations might want somewhere just to try something out, just to prototype, see if it works. So we'll have 3D printers, for example, and we'll also be able to call on some of the apprentices in the Skills Academy to help them do that. And we'll have a maker space dedicated to that as well for the incubation and prototyping. And also, we can drive collaborative products, particularly drawing on the academic partner expertise that we have here. So in summary, we're a year down the line. We have a very clear mission and a very clear vision of where we're going. And despite the difficulties that everyone's experienced in terms of the uncertainties in the market, and of course, notwithstanding the global pandemic, we're ahead of our target in terms of jobs. We're ahead of our target in terms of boots on the ground, to coin a phrase. And I think, again, to coin a phrase that the Cabinet Secretary used, the rubber really has hit the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Greg. So that brings us to the end of the case studies. So 5 different case studies that showcase different things in terms of this agenda. What we're going to now do is take kind of 5-10 minutes, have a quick comfort break, because I'm very conscious everybody's been sitting, not least with a mask on, for some time. So if you could all be back by 20 past, you can put some questions on Slido if you'd like to submit those in advance, and if not, then stick your hand up once we come back in to the session, and we'll get roving mics just to make sure that we take questions. So back by 20 past. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully that was good, just to get a little bit of a comfort break after listening to all of the sessions. Lots of food for thought, and certainly for me, I was taking lots of notes around things that I think we can learn from, certainly in Scotland. So thank you for those of you who've already been putting some questions in Slido. So what we're going to do is take some of those questions. Hopefully we have the panel going to join behind us on screen, and Greg has also joined me on stage. I'm just going to wait for the panel to join us, hopefully. Yeah? Excellent. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your presentations. You probably can't see us in Glasgow, but both Greg and I are on the stage, and the rest of the audience has come back. So I'm first of all going to ask anyone in the room that would like to put their hand up, just so that we've got some time to get mics to you. And when the mic comes to you, if you could say who you are and then your question. So maybe start with the audience. Over here, question over here.
Alan Hendry from Mott MacDonald. A lot of the examples we saw were very much place-based approaches to net zero and industrial regeneration. Would any of the panel like to say something about that, the nature of place-based and how that has impacted or brought forward their initiatives?
Greg, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I can. Can everybody hear me? Yes. So we're lucky enough to live in, I think, one of the most dynamic and forward-looking cities in Scotland. The regeneration and the development that's going on in Dundee is quite incredible. But that is because of the people who are there and the insight and the ambition and the drive that everyone has. I know that the leader of the council often says that Dundee is the right size. It's not too big and it's not too small. It's kind of the Goldilocks city, plus the sunniest city in Scotland. But I think that it's really yes, the place, but it's the people that we find in the place that are making the difference from an MSIP perspective.
Reijo, would you like to comment from the work that you've been doing in terms of creating a place-based innovation district?
First of all, I think that we are having same situation as a Dundee, and one key element is that we are having that local university who has been taking actively in that Heiderannan project, and actually when we started with this project nearly 7 years ago, it was not so common to talk about this net zero or net negative future, and this has taken quite long time that we start with our ideas, but now the whole society has more or less changes their ideas, and that's I think that is one important element, and also city change how it works. So we open that area gates and city has possibility also to support those developers who want to be part of that area development also a little bit in the beginning, and rent prices was quite low in the beginning in that area. I think that those are perhaps some examples how we have been doing in promoting developers join this project.
Thank you very much. If I can add to that, certainly in my experience, and I've been involved in a few place-based projects with Scottish Enterprise, I think there's a big thing around not one size fits all. So it's good to learn and it's good to listen and hear the insights, but the set of circumstances in a particular place, you know, what the people are looking for, what the partners are looking for, the assets that are there, it needs to fit with the ambitions and the place. It's not always easy just to kind of try and overlay something that's worked somewhere else. So taking the time, and we really did take the time around Michelin, or we took the time around the work that we've done in some of the other projects to really understand what do we have here, what would work, who else needs to be around the table, and the values-based approach to that was actually quite important, because that's how you create a team. So we weren't just partners who came together, we really were a team that got in a room and said we want to make this work. And you know, so good that, you know, we heard that some Michelin staff went to work for MSIP, and some of the guys from Scottish Enterprise went to work for MSIP because we believed in it so much. So I think it's about taking that time and investment, and you can't recreate that. And so I think taking the time to do that is probably what would be my certain experience around that. I'm going to move now to a question from Slido that's, you know, talks very much just around, you know, having the ambition and, you know, setting that action out is really quite important, but there's just a question around how do you really get it going and what do you do? So I was going to actually ask Narve around to talk about that, given what you shared, and I certainly found that really quite helpful just in terms of the examples. Do you want to talk a little bit more just around how do you get it going and how do you build momentum?
How we get going? I'm not quite sure that I understand the question.
So a question really just around, it's not just always about talk, it's about action. So saying you're going to do something is one thing, but actually taking steps to take action is quite another. And I think I was quite taken about the stories you told around, you know, the pilots that you did and how you scaled them up. I think a little bit more just around, you know, talking about some examples of that I would be quite helpful.
In general, Norwegians have been at the sea for ages, since the Viking times. So we have very strong connections there. And the Norwegian maritime industry is very forward-leaning then. So, for instance, the Shipowner Association had implemented a zero-emission strategy, I think 14 years ago. So we see the market opportunities, we see that there will be big changes, and we see that if we do things at home, when that will help us to be prepared for a large international market that will come later on as United Nations and IMO is implementing their carbon reduction strategy. So no, I think that's it. And also, of course, we have good arrangements from the government. And we have had the NOx fund that has been very successful for years now, has helped us to do the transformation. And we have the Research Council, we have a special agency for CO2 reductions, etc. So there are good arrangements as well. Of course, that is important, but always you shall have a certain amount of the investment yourself. So these arrangements are just reducing the risk to some extent.
That's great, thank you. If I can maybe expand that question out, first of all, to Iris, just to really talk about, given it's such a collaborative model that you've got, what are some of the challenges that you've had, either around collaboration or resistance, in terms of getting action going?
Yes, there are some hurdles to go into action. So yes, we are working a lot on concepts, on roadmaps, and try to push the industry right to the to change their technologies, to change their products and resources. But in many cases, there's no business case. So the industry cannot change the technology unless they get less money. So what we offer is the communication with the government to change the regulations, that there will be business cases for the new technologies.
Thank you very much. Greg, do you want to kind of comment just around, from your perspective, because you came in very much at the point of the vision was there, but it was about implementation.
Yes, I came in at the fortunate time when a lot of the difficult work had been done, and we had this fantastic endowment of the site, which was given to us, as well as all the investment that had gone on before that, and the active support of the three partners in the exercise. What we did as a team is we had our kind of, we called it our Mary Poppins moment, you know, well begun is half done. So let's just take a little minute to say, first of all, who is the customer that we're addressing? And secondly, what are their needs? What are their jobs, pains, gains? And thirdly, what is it we're going to put in front of them as an offer, and as an offer that will differentiate us to make us attractive? And then last but not least, what value is there in that for us? Costs versus the value that we can extract from it, because we are a commercial operation. And that very much gave us the guide in terms of where we're going to go and the steps along the way. We had our vision, we had our mission, and that gave us a roadmap to get there. Another thing which was a crucial part of the whole project as it was, and the adventure as it is now, was laying the foundations, laying the basic foundations in terms of all the processes that were required, because although we all came from backgrounds who had a lot of expertise in that, from industry or from Scottish enterprise or from other walks of life, we didn't have that at MSIP. So you have to lay, there's no point telling small companies that are just starting out, well, you need to look after your cash flow, and you need to look after your growth, and you need to look after your customer. We had to do that ourselves. And also transforming the site so it's fit for purpose. But we now have, I think, a really good foundation, and we're starting to grow. And the thing that we measure all the time when we talk about growth is how many cars are in the car park. And we started off a year ago and there was maybe 3 or 4, and now one of the car parks is nearly full. So.
That's great, thank you. Is there any other questions in the room, if you'd like to put your hand up? Question over here from John.
Hi, thanks very much. Yeah, John Backley, PRC at Strathclyde University. Just developing the last conversation you had about the role of government. We heard about what Iris had said about the role of Infoclimate. And I wondered whether we could maybe pass that question on to Jörg Dehmel from Shell as to, you know, what is the most valuable role, particularly in the North Rhine-Westphalian context, that government has provided in promoting decarbonisation? Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Could you hear that question okay, Jörg?
Yeah, no, I think I got it. And thanks for this question. And I think once you have decided for your company that you want to go on a transformation journey and really, let's say, changing not only the way, let's say, you're working yourself, but also changing an entire energy system, you very quickly will find out that a lot of things needs to come together. So it's really about partners. It's also what has been mentioned before about the customer. So what are really the customer needs? That was, of course, the center of our analysis of how can we help our customers to decarbonize? So what are the products the customer needs? And then translating this back. And once you have done that analysis, you pretty quickly will find out, we need to move away from our classical, let's say, over 100 years established value chains from crude, moving of crude, refining crude, selling product at the retail side to the customers. We need to change this completely, and this then you realize I need to have a different infrastructure. I need to have different partners, but I also need to have. Just take cars. You need to have different cars. If no one manufactures a hydrogen car, it is good if I have hydrogen at my retail site, but there are not enough customers there. So really thinking there a completely different way. Also, what does it mean in terms of infrastructure? That's what we have done, and InfoClimate has been there very instrumental because they also have put their roadmaps together. We have our roadmap, and then we could start these interaction thing. What does we need, but also what does North Rhine-Westphalia need as an energy system of the future? For example, there has been a hydrogen roadmap put together. How in North Rhine-Westphalia we see the hydrogen economy and what kind of infrastructures is necessary, but also what kind of regulations are necessary in order to promote this. We are working on synthetic fuels, etc. So you have put this into a roadmap, into studies, and then by this you also see what kind of partners do you need. Also, if you think about completely different new feedstocks, if you're talking about recycling, all of a sudden we need plastic waste as a feed to our acid, where we haven't been used to before. So how do we partner up? What does it mean? What kind of infrastructure do we need in order to allow this to be happen? So and there really the liaison with the government and also with InfoClimate is of course very helpful, because you can really then pave the road for the industry. It's part. Transformation is really about partnering up, but it's also about discussing with others how to realize things. And then the other component, which was part of the earlier question, I think at a certain point of time, you also need to start up with piloting, like we have done with the REFHYNE project, which was also done with partners, by the way. Or you need to start doing things. And when you start doing things, then you interact with much more people, with much more partners, so you really start get it rolling, and that's what we try to do.
No. Oh, that's it now. So thanks very much. And just to build on that a little bit more, so I agree with that. I think you need to make sure that it's public and private working together, but flexing and adapting the model based particularly on what companies are needing. So the infrastructure needs to flex on that, the skills need to flex. It would be good to hear, I think, particularly from Christian and from Greig, and maybe kind of wider just around what your sense is around whether it's attracting startup companies or inward investment companies, what you've learned around the work that you've done around what's the best way to attract them. So Christian, I wonder if you could kind of maybe kick that off from a clean tech perspective.
We don't want to attract directly startups. Of course, here in Bamberg, there's still a standard for startups, but what comes behind the startups? And we want to attract this presentation that we want to attract the small and the middle companies, and when they want to do new things, innovation, not enough money to create this. They need infrastructure for this. And this is the thing we want in our project.
Greg, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think ideally our approach that we have, the ideal journey is a company joins us perhaps on an accelerator program or a challenge in a small startup with an excellent concept, and we help that company through the various stages and through the various parts of our park, so that ultimately they take over one of the bigger areas, the larger areas, to grow and hit the market. However, as a commercial operation, we need turnover, and therefore we need to attract some bigger companies in who will, one, help us pay the rates bill, because if it's all lying empty, then the clock's ticking on the endowment that we've been given. And secondly, to get a kind of an anchor tenant who may have some specialist knowledge, but typically an anchor tenant is quite big, and that big anchor tenant may attract others in as well. We're fairly sure that there's a couple of organisations that we hope to get over the line in the next, let's say the next 2 months, but one might be quicker than that. Can't say anything, but you know how it goes. The minute that those companies show their hand, there may be a bit of a domino effect, because we've only got a limited amount of space, and hopefully that will attract in others. I would also pick up exactly what Linda was saying there. You have to be flexible. I mean, our plan doesn't survive the first contact with the enemy sort of thing. You know, you really need to keep your options quite open, albeit still having that vision and that direction in front of you.
Thanks, Greg. So I'm going to do a question to everybody. So just giving you the heads up. What's the one thing that you might have heard this afternoon from someone else that you think might be a good insight for your project? So I'm going to start off with Iris.
I find it really interesting to hear from Reijo how they build up this project with the people who are living really there, and people who will use, for example, the garden, the food. Yes, so the really interactions with the public.
That's great. Thanks, Iris. Christian?
I've learned this afternoon really a lot of the things, and also the interaction of the different projects. I think it's the best of it.
Okay, thank you. We lost you almost at the end there, but I think I got that just around that practical dimension. Jörg?
Yeah, for me, it was, I think, very good to see that we, let's say, all have somehow similar problems, and it is also seeing then the different approaches. That was for me extremely helpful. I mean, also from Christian to hear what they have done. Let's say, yeah, we are all in it together. That's what I really personally see. And I mean, there's only one world, so it's also good that we are all in it together.
Yep, I completely agree with that. Reijo?
I more or less say the same, because the cooperation is key, and cooperation is always interaction between persons, and you need to have that kind of person who are putting themselves in developing or co-work, and the biggest thing that I have learned is that this kind of big companies, as a Michelin or Shell, that you are really putting that kind of effort and you are having that kind of strong idea to make change. So this is something that have given me, let's say, power to continue this changing world goal, because this is not so easy, and I think that we have started many years ago, and this has been quite not so easy work, and now it's nice to hear that there are lots of companies who are having this kind of goal and activities.
Thank you. Greig?
I think, first of all, it's been very enriching and reassuring to find that despite the fact, as you said, Linda, one size does not fit all, there are some common themes running through everything that we've seen today. As the Cabinet Secretary mentioned, we've got trust, we've got ambition, and we've got breaking down the silos so that everybody pulls together in the same direction. So that was very reassuring, and I think we can draw a lot from that. From a more practical point of view, because we like being practical, don't we, team? I'm interested in this biochar. Hadn't come across that before, but I saw my team's eyes light up there, so I'd like to have a look at that as well.
That's great, thanks. And last but not least, Narve?
I think for us in the transportation sector, it's extremely important and that major companies really are taking climate change seriously. Logistic departments in major companies, normally they are looked at as a cost center, not a strategic part of the company. But if you have a corporate strategy where you encourage all departments, all units to save emissions, then also that will give possibilities for the logistics department. And we see a big difference just from the last couple of years. Big difference. So that's very good to see that the major companies here also are really going forward in very many areas with respect to getting the emissions down. From our side, as I said in my presentation, the key issue is really to make the green markets to go, because the public sector cannot really cope with this alone. You need also private financing and get going with normal mechanisms in business.
Thank you. I wanted to come next just to ask Patricia just around from a government perspective what other asks you would have of the private sector, because Florent talked at the beginning of the event very much it's time for business to move into action. It is for governments to set some of that regulatory and policy environment. But I just wondered if you had any reflections just around further asks of the private sector to help take forward this agenda that we've got.
Sorry, could you repeat your question? What's the question you just posed?
So just to repeat that, so my question was just around, as Florent talked at the beginning of the session today, just about business moving, it's time for business to move into action to see the difference that we want on climate change, and for obviously public sector to set that regulatory and policy environment. What would your reflections be or your asks be of the private sector as we start to take forward this transformation of industrial sites? Did you have any reflections on that?
Well, for us it was a process of learning, and I I share the view that was just mentioned. It wouldn't have happened if not big companies would have been involved, and then we can sort of accompany them on their way and sort of try to find the way together. Because as one thing that I've learned in this session is that also we may join the same vision. Each project and each path is different. So this doesn't come off the peg, and especially for a government, we can also only solve it in a dialogue, and only solve it if we move onwards step for step. I'm not sure if that's quite what you intended to hear, but that's my expertise in this process.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there one last question in the room before I hand over to Richard to wrap this up? No? So with that, I wanted to thank everyone, to thank all of the panel and all of the speakers that we've had today. I think certainly for me, lots to learn in terms of takeaways and some of the practicalities of what we need to do. As was mentioned at the beginning, the investment that both Scottish Government and Michelin are making around this kind of community of practice, if you like, today is just the start of that, and certainly a richness around good examples and networking, good connections that hopefully we will all make. All of the slides from today will be available, and so that will be shared, and obviously any other kind of content that people might be interested in, just get in touch and we'll be very happy to make sure that we can follow that up. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone, and to hand over to Richard Rollinson from Scottish Government.
Hi everyone, I'm Richard Rollinson. I'm the Director of International Trade and Investment with the Scottish Government. I've been involved in the Michelin project since November 2018, so it's really good to see it, and other examples kind of 3 years later. I'm going to sit in my comfy chair as well. So firstly, just a thanks to everyone for their presentations and case studies today, and also, although we've only heard from you on Slido, I think we had about 250 people kind of joining us virtually from Mexico, from Germany, from Japan, and Bhutan was in there as well. So good to have an international audience today. Just before I make a few final remarks, also to thank the University of Strathclyde and the Policy Research Centre for helping organise the event. And a big thanks actually to Eleanor in my team and to the tech guys. So I come into today going, oh my God, this tech is going to be pretty hard work, and they've done a fantastic job, and we seem to have got everybody from across the world together as one. So we've heard from pretty different case studies, actually. So from if I could say it, Nord Rhine-Westphalia and Shell, so very much a kind of regional and a very industry piece, about a new city region in Tampere, about a sector approach in Norway around green shipping, and of course about the sort of connected but slightly different approaches in Bamberg and Dundee. But I think, as our colleague from Shell was saying, there's quite a lot of commonalities across all of those, despite the differences of the projects. And I think you said we're all in it together. I think that came across very strongly from the presentations. I think I would go back to something that Ms. Forbes said, which was being able to, and I think this came across, being able to see this, the transition to net zero as an opportunity, I think, to create new businesses, to create new ways of living, and actually to create that just transition that a number of speakers have touched on. I think what was also clear from the presentations is, and Florent touched on this, but it came out again in others, it needs to stack up commercially. So whatever you're doing, it needs to work with the competitiveness of your industry, and the government might need to help in making that happen, in shaping the market, in regulating, but the thing needs to stack up. We heard a lot today about partnership, so I think partnership between government and industry. There was quite a lot of slides with lots of logos on, you know, so slides which weren't just about government and industry, but were about the supply chains and how sectors and different sites are working right through their supply chain to support that transition. And of course, we heard from Tampere about that work with people and communities. So not doing something to people, but involving them in the process, and making sure that what we're producing, what we're shaping, involves them and engages them. And we also touched throughout on the important role of innovation in this. So a number of examples, whether you call it incubators or innovation centers, of those sites and those governments working together to help stimulate innovation and change. And I suppose lastly, we heard, and again going back to what Florent was saying, and Greg touched on it as well, the importance of skills and upskilling and reskilling people so that they're ready for the creation of these kind of new jobs and new industries. So despite the kind of different places we were talking about today and the different industries, I think quite a lot of commonality. When we were originally engaged in Michelin, and still now, I can remember sitting in a room in Dundee with some of the Michelin guys and them saying, we want to make this an exemplar so that other people across Europe and across the world go, what can we learn from Michelin in Dundee? I think we could also say that about some of the examples we've heard from today. And you may have missed it in the discussion between Florent and Kate Forbes, but between Michelin and the Scottish Government, we're going to put in £75,000 each over the next couple of years to create an exchange, which has a catchy acronym of NICE, the Net Zero Industrial Cluster Exchange, supported by John Batchelor and his colleagues at the University of Strathclyde, which is about building on the conversation and the discussions we've had today so that we can learn from each other. So we see that as a kind of regular program of workshops and events and an online platform, project visits and site demonstrations, policy engagement across government, and basically it's maybe a version of your big coffee machine, Greg. So a big coffee machine, somehow facilitated by the university, that brings people together to help build on the learning we've had today and to help people exchange ideas and policy, and I suppose seeing Dundee as the sort of spiritual home of that network. So we're here in Glasgow because of COP, clearly. I think if we'd been doing this at any other time of year, we would have been in Dundee, so we will aim to do that in the not too distant future. I'd encourage you, we'll be in touch with you about that network. We'd be really pleased if you could get involved in that. And as Linda said, we will of course share the slides from today. So it's just to wish you all a good evening. Thanks for coming today. Enjoy the rest of COP. Enjoy Glasgow, and we will see you again, hopefully. Thank you.